and I hope this is okay for everyone. We will only use it internally for those of us who cannot join this session. So now we are recording. So hi and welcome to this training on youth organizing, mobilizing and activism. It's really fun to see you here. So thank you for coming and taking the time. We only have 2 hours and there's a lot to cover. But before giving the space to our trainer, I would like to introduce him a little bit. So hi and welcome, Karl Andreasson. It's so nice to have you here. Karl is the trainer lead at the Movement Hub, and the Movement Hub is a project run by Greenpeace and works to empower like anyone, but especially grassroots groups fighting for positive change in the world. And except from this, Karl has trained and taken part in so many different organizing and mobilizing events. Both as a trainer and an activist. So it's you're a very experienced trainer to have here today with us. And that was all I had to say. And so over to you, Karl.
Thank you, Fanny. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I'm really excited to meet everybody here involved in this work. I've been following it with a lot of interest. I must admit, I was also part of a team that was consulted and as the project proposals were written for this. And I'm really, really excited to see this sort of type of self-organized space with all the possibilities and challenges that brings in. And I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity and the privilege to meet with you and to talk about that type of organizing and how we engage and create spaces that allow for more people to make their voices heard in their own way. And that is why I think it's sort of the most valuable part of any form of activism or engagement work, to be able to bring that and create those type of spaces. So to do that, I have a bit of a structure and setup for us today, which will be an interactive type of workshop where we can share ideas or reflect on your own type of organizing. But I'd like to just start with a quick round of introductions, if that's okay, so I can get to know you a bit as well. So if you could share your name, your pronoun, and where you're based, I'd love to hear that. So, like I said, my name is Karl, pronouns he, him. I'm based in Uppsala in Sweden. And then you can pass it on to the next person. So, Iris, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Iris. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden at Momentum. Let's see, Tracy, do you want to go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Tracy. I'm sorry for the background noise. My pronouns are she, her, and I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. Over to Mahile.
Hi everyone, based in Johannesburg, South Africa. My pronouns are he, him. I'll pass it on to Andile.
Hi everybody, thank you, Mahile. This side is afternoon. Yeah, afternoon everybody. And my pronouns are he, him. Yeah, I'm from Johannesburg, Planet One, Ubuntu Hub. I'll pass it on to okay. Let's see.
I think that's funny.
Fanny.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fanny.
Yes. Hi.
She started the call, so
yeah. Hi, thanks, Andile. So my name is Fanny. I'm based in Sweden. I'm living outside of Stockholm in Enköping. It's like 1.5 hours from the capital. And my pronouns is she, her. So.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. So yeah, I'm assuming at this point that all of you are, at this point of the pandemic and this type of international organizing, that you're quite familiar with Zoom, but do please let me know if there's any troubles or you're experiencing any technical difficulties and we'll try to help you out. And of course, we're going to have a lot of discussion and conversations, so and we're quite few of us. So I'd actually skip this one and actually say that if there's anything that comes up, please just go ahead and unmute and ask a question, and we can have more of a conversation than presentation, which I much prefer. So the goal for this workshop and with Plan 1 is an idea of us to sort of support each hub and in our own capacity, and also in terms of like thinking about every hub into reflecting how we attract and engage youth into movement and maker spaces. So how do we make it easier and more accessible and more exciting to come in, join, and stay in these type of spaces? And in order to do that, we have a couple of desired outcomes for this specific call, which is understanding different roles in a movement, different ways people are engaged or decide to engage in creating change, and this sort of reflection about what our hubs are offering right now and what they could offer in the future to engage more people. So almost like a two-step discussion process. And the way we're going to set this up today is you're going to have to hear me talk for a little bit. We're going to go through a little bit of just sort of getting the jargon so we're on the same page. The difference between mobilizing and organizing, a little bit on a theory called the 4 roles in a movement on Bill Moyer, by an author called Bill Moyer in the book Doing Democracy. And then we're going to go into a bit of the brainstorm. So we have a new model that we're introducing and trying to get your feedback and sharing now called the Tree of Engagement, about how to organize and retain people in organizing groups. So I'm going to present the model, and we're going to take a breakout discussion and reflect, how does the tree model look like right now in our hubs? I'm going to take a quick break to freshen up, get some more water, and then we'll come back and we'll get into more of that discussion. So what can we add to our existing tree to engage more people with this sort of reflection and knowledge we have? And we'll be out of here before 2 hours is up, so to respect your time, perhaps even earlier. So does that sound as a good setup, or any questions to that agenda? Can't see any thumbs up. Thank you, Tracy, for using the tool. All right, great. Let's get started. So this is the classic thing I always get wrong when I get started with activism, and always leads to confusion among different groups. What is mobilizing? What is organizing? So when you hear the word mobilizing, what comes to your mind? What do you think of? And you can feel free to just unmute and comment. Iris?
I'd say gathering, either like numbers being people or different competences, or like gathering things that you need.
Gathering people, bringing together
the workforce, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? What do you think of when you hear mobilizing?
I think about people, but with a specific cause or call to action. Yeah, I'd say that over.
So bringing people together for a specific cause with specific demand, perhaps. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Then, on the other hand, what comes to mind when you think about organizing or hear the word organizing?
I'd say strategy.
Andila, do you want to share?
Yeah, I was thinking recruitment when you're organizing, because when it's more of when you mobilize, right? This is on top of my head, yeah, Carl?
Yeah. So how do we, who are we bringing in, or how do we get people?
So when you organize, you're recruiting people, and it's more formalized because it has a structure, rather than when you mobilize people, it could be just a call out to say, look, we're having an activity, we're having a protest, we're having a march, just come together, we're going to picket, you're mobilizing people. Whilst when you are organizing, it's more, formal. That's what I'm thinking. So you're recruiting them with the end goal to say, now this is how it's going to be, and yeah.
So not for a specific event, but for like a continued work and a structure, right?
Yeah, structured way. Yeah.
Hi, Gerald. Warm welcome. Glad to have you with us. We're in the middle of a discussion about the difference between organizing and mobilizing. So glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Carl.
Right. So exactly what we've been saying. So this definition, or the way it's usually described as a definition, is the difference between mobilizing is getting people to do something, like Trace said, for a cause or in a direction. But organizing is getting people together to decide what to do and why and how we're going to do it, and sort of the structure of it. And this takes many different shapes and many different forms of activism and change, creating change. But organizing can sometimes be seen as sort of the long-term goal and how to create that change. Examples would be sort of like mobilizing would be, exercising, demonstrating power, protests in the streets, or like can be online and digital mobilizing as well. Can be engaging with partners and allies to join some activity and trying to get them to join. You can call participants to join a single event. Sometimes it's very reactive to sort of external events, or you're responding to something that has happened. And typically sort of short-term objectives. We want to get this out and ahead. Organizing, on the other hand, is about sort of building long-term power. Taking people from just joining something to taking sort of ownership of the strategy or the change they want to create for the group or campaign, and sustain sort of long-term impact and vision. And this is not sort of a value judgment on either. They're just like different types of activities you can be doing. Like organizers will often see mobilization as a tactic to be used in the service of a broader strategy. Yeah, let's just do a quick quiz, because then if we see that this is parts of it. So here's a couple quick examples, and I want you to sort of, in the chat, write if you think it's mobilizing or organizing. Does that sound good? All right, no pressure, it's not a serious quiz, you're not gonna be graded. So is this mobilizing or organizing? You just write in the chat. Tracy, hands up, a thumbs up for, I'm not sure if that means it's, oh, that's her. Okay, Aris, mobilizing, yes. Moby, absolutely, you're right, this is mobilizing. It's an example of a climate march, and I forget where. I used to know this. Is this Slovakia's climate march? I can't remember actually. If somebody recognizes the language, please let me know. I should know this in the presentation. So yeah, mobilizing, getting people in the streets, clear demands. This is an example of Fridays for Future. This is the message we wanted people to hear and create that sort of change. What about this? Mobilizing or organizing in the chat? Gerald and Tracy thinks organizing. Yep. You're absolutely right. This is an example, I believe it's from the US, on a voter sign-up drive. So getting people to sort of structure and engage in how to talk to people and build sort of change in terms of, and the long-term goal was voter turnout, but this is sort of training people into how to do that. What about this? Mobilizing or organizing? Gerald says organizing. Org, Magila, org. Yeah, you're right. Another example of organizing. This is in fact a union organizing meeting I do believe this one was the UK. I'm not entirely sure. So unions building long-term power, building membership, getting people to join in and create that sort of power within the workforce, longer-term strategy. The last example is this. Is this mobilizing or organizing? Moby, yes. Lila, Charles, Funny, Tracy, yeah, you're right. Mobilizing, this is an example of a mass protest against coal mines in Germany called Ende Gelände, which is near and dear to my heart. I quite enjoy those actions. Bringing lots of people together, shutting down the oppressive system that they're protesting against, but typically only for a few days at most at a time. Great, so this is super clear, wonderful. Don't think you need to have any more. Any questions on difference between mobilizing and organizing? It seems you nailed it, to be honest. No? Great. Let's go into something a bit more complicated then. So what I want to talk about, the second theory of the only two I promised to provide you today, is the roles in the movement. So this is based on nothing that I've come up with. This is based on Bill Moyer's book on Doing Democracy and talking about how social change is created in society. And I quite like this model because it really illustrates the different roles and how different people engage in movements. And a typical thing we see in movement building is a lot of sort of internal fighting and critique of each other's strategies in creating change, and a lot of sort of infighting instead of sort of seeing how these roles play together. So what I hope to accomplish with this little talk here and this little exercise is to us to sort of think about how these different roles complement each other, how they work differently in a movement, and we're just going to go through them and talk about their strengths and their weaknesses as we go along. So just to give you the overview, the way Bill Moyer defines these four roles is that they're the citizen, reformer, rebel, and change agent. So the citizen is the sort of like people creating change outside the system and creating their own solutions. Be that, building, giving direct humanitarian aids to refugees who are arriving in your country, be it sort of building solutions or your own agriculture farm, putting up solar panels on your own roof, whatever that might be. So direct, creating change, creating solutions, but on sort of with individuals or small groups, organizations, or community basis solutions work. So I can't see the chat. Thanks, Mila, I appreciate that. Then there's the reformer and lobbyist role, and that role engages with the power structure. So it's about, talking to the city mayor about an issue or problem that there is, about lobbying for a specific change or raising issues through legal means, trying to create political change within the structures of the system. So whatever that what that allows. And here we come to Charles' favorite other one is the rebel. So the rebel's role is pointing the finger and identifying the real problem in society. So typically when we see an issue, we talk about the victims of that issue or the people affected, but we don't talk about the people responsible. So pointing the finger at the companies, at the politicians, saying no, this is not enough. Very often associated with the classic idea people think about activism, the banners, the protests, the placards. This is where people tend to associate with activism and change, but one role among the many. And last is what Bill Moyer talks about is the change agent. So change agent is a bit different. They organize sort of long-term strategy, works on sort of educating the mainstream, building networks and alliances, a little bit more of that sort of background work in a movement that is also important for the other roles to succeed. So these are the four roles that they identify. Any questions or clarifications on that? Thumbs up from Charles. No questions? Okay, good. Then this should be easy for you. Because then my next question is, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of a citizen? Iris?
I'd say strength is that they don't rely on like bureaucracy or organized official management to get things done. But on the other hand, then a weakness would be maybe not processes being as streamlined and as effective or efficient as could be.
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. Doesn't involve the people in power, aren't the ones can't stop them from creating the change they want to see. Also, like this less streamlined. Yeah, it's also ad hoc. Like it's where you can create the change. It's not a systematic shift that happens. It is like where the citizens are acting, and it's not a sort of a broad. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else on a strength or weakness of the citizen approach?
Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think another thing that's a strength for citizens is that we have the voting power. So we vote our leaders and who'd like to, advance causes. Yeah, that's one for me.
So I don't think Bill Moyer means citizens in sort of the voting power way. I think in how to create change. So if people are encouraging voting, maybe that might be more of a sort of a reformer role. I actually haven't thought about where that would lie. Sort of like voter turnout initiatives and stuff like that. That's a good challenge. I like that, Ndile. I need to think about that. Yeah. Anything else on this role?
Well, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
So, or maybe I can say weakness. I can go on with the weakness part. I feel like they're not united, so it's easy to break the bond, or they don't even have a bond. So because these are individuals, so it's easy to shut them down. Yeah. So yeah, it's easy to shut them down. There's no that unity. Yeah.
They aren't building sort of their oppositional power. They might not have sort of the same organizational structures to create that broader change. You can shut them down on an individual basis. Say a government was against, other types of agriculture or communal farming, they can shut it down in a specific instance, rather than, having a sort of a structural systemic change associated with it. Magila?
Yeah, for me, I would say citizens is always the strength, the power in working in a larger group, and then the weakness is that at the end of the day, everyone is gonna go their separate ways.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part again? I think it lagged a bit. Maybe speak a little bit louder.
Okay, yeah, with the weaknesses, the strength, working in a group, it has more power to make change. But then the weakness is that at the end of the day, everyone is gonna go their separate ways. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's not a sort of continuous program or a structure to it. Absolutely, yeah. So what Bill Moyer will add to that on the theory is also that the idea that citizens are typically rooted in the center of society. That means that they generate acceptance for a movement among other citizens. Just drawing an example from Sweden right now, in 2015, we had a massive refugee crisis, a lot of people arriving from Syria and across the Mediterranean. And a huge amount of people did the citizen role and did humanitarian aid and support for refugees arriving in Sweden. They mainstreamed the acceptance of that sort of connection to the need for taking care of refugees, raised the problem, and saw sort of very sympathetic face. It's also a very good way for movements not to lose contact with the main constituency. It's something that's easier to engage with usually, or with lower risk or lower repression than other movements, other parts of the movement. And that also protects the broader movement a bit from repression. But Bill Moyer also highlights that they're ineffective when in the role they're naive and think themselves that power holders' official policy is going to create the change. Or if they still believe, got cut off there, still believe in the system's ability or willingness to engage on the issue. So you can also be a bit blinded, thinking everything will be fine in my little bubble, things are good, without seeing the broader perspective. All right, but let's go to the reformer or lobbyist role. Let's start off with some strengths. What are some strengths of the reformer role?
Maybe I can jump in.
Please.
Oh, okay. From the what do you call it? The definition is this is a person who engages with power structures in a dialogue. So I think I can say some of the strength is they have a direct contact with people in power, and they can achieve or curate change from that position. So they have contact with the people in power.
Absolutely. And can actually create those shifts with the system and the bureaucracy quite relatively quickly sometimes by creating that sort of, this is what needs to be changed or this needs to be shifted. Yeah, absolutely. Andile?
So I'm not sure on this one, but I'm thinking if we think unions
Mm.
Because they're lobbying, they're speaking to power, and they come from organized. So if you have organized workers saying we don't want this, they'll have union leaders to lobby for them and speak directly to power. Would that be correct, Karl?
Absolutely, yeah. So the lobbying efforts of a union or union leaders would be a reformer role. We're working with either be the power holders in our company or state, depending on what kind of work they're trying to do. But then when the workers strike or remove that support, then they're in the rebel role, right? So
Yes.
so an organization doesn't have to maintain a single role. It's usually sort of broad approaches. Some organization will like shift between different roles. I think Greenpeace is a great example where they start every campaign with the reformer role. Let's try to lobby an activist, and then they keep the threat of the rebel and the actions in the blockade as a way to engage. So it's about finding, there's not people can shift in the roles and they're not stuck in them. Is what I'm trying to say. Iris, strength or weaknesses on lobbyist reformer? Sorry.
I'd say that I think it may be a strength or a weakness that the line between a reformer and a lobbyist is quite thin, even though they're, in my opinion, at least quite different things and play quite different roles in society and a democracy apparatus. And that I think that it can be very easy as a reformer to go into something wanting to do good, but then finding yourself slipping into the more lobbyist structures of just like patting one another on the back and going on fancy trips and eating fancy dinners without actually doing much.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why I usually include sort of / lobbyist in this. These roles can be used for evil, right? And you're really touching upon a really interesting point of when a reformer becomes ineffective, is by they can be sort of, if they associate more with the people in power than the people they're supposed to be supporting, and all these sort of fancy dinners kind of thing, then you're not sort of pushing the movement's best interests at heart. You're just sort of continuing the structure of the status quo. Absolutely, yeah. Charles, last point here.
And I forgot to add this, both the citizen and the reformer, both of them have the minimal risk in terms of when it comes to maybe security or any other type of thing. So yeah, they have the minimal risk.
Yeah, it makes it different, approachable for different forms. Of course, depending on where you are, any of these can provide sort of high risk. I'd say reformers in Russia right now are at high risk for change as well. So risk varies, of course, within the political landscape, but typically in democratic societies, we see these usually as lower risk. Yeah. What Bill Moyer adds, we talked about most of it, I think. So reformers also have an ability to sort of using the official channels, like we said, and the courts and parliaments, and they're often very badly valued in movements. People don't really tend to like reformer roles. There's also very often like the conflict I was talking about tends to exist quite here. But they're actually the ones in a movement who prove the failure of the existing system and can promote alternative solutions. So reformers are a key part in any movement, even though they're not often very valued. And then Iris already mentioned this idea of them engaging sort of too much with the people in power, or propose reforms that are too small to really consolidate a movement's success, then they become an ineffective agent of change. Rebel. What's the strength or weakness of rebel? Gerald, you had your favorite role here. Do you want to reflect on
that? First, I enjoy it. So yeah, it's rebels. I feel in terms of strength is I can say the act or the person or what do you call it? They make the change to come out fast. So yeah, if you're an NVDA activist at Greenpeace, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, like it's so easy for you to effect change. Then the second thing on the weakness, I can say it's risky because you might be jailed or you might be, but whatever can happen in this point. Then another strength that I'm thinking of is it gives you that purpose. Like for me, it's more of an internal type of thing. It gives you purpose, to go out and do it more and more. But if something is successful, it gives you that purpose. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Tracy?
For me, I'll say one of the weaknesses is sometimes a rebel might not be willing to go through channels that make sense. I'm just drawing an example from the guys that I don't know if they threw, I don't know if it was sauce or something on the painting, the flowers painting. You see, the message wasn't clear and it made their image become even worse. So it needs some level of creativity that will actually pass the message in a way that people will understand. Over.
Yeah, I could talk forever about that action. I think it's really, really interesting. It was a Just Stop Oil action where they threw tomato sauce on the Van Gogh painting in the UK. And it's quite interesting because that's also part of what the rebel role typically does, is about polarization. You try to create sort of a shift or a moral choice in society about what you stand for. And the message in this case was, are you more concerned about a painting than you are about sort of the actual destruction of our ecosystems and the real sunflowers in the world? It should be noted, though, that the painting wasn't harmed. There's glass in front of the painting, and the painting wasn't harmed in the action. And it's created a huge debate and a huge sort of structure or stuff like that. And that can sometimes be the role of the rebel, to create that controversy, create that drama that journalists went like targeting the problem, and sort of build on this discussion and change the narratives as sort of the broader perspective. That ties quite in actually with, we talked a little bit when they're effective and ineffective rebels. So like Charles mentioned, sort of they're, people identify with it, people are excited by it, how people usually see social movements. You can put the problem on the political agenda, be it sort of by targeting the target or targeting a painting. Exciting, courageous, but also very risky. It can be very ineffective with them as well if they become isolated on the fringe or create sort of a militant radical fringe that is isolated from mainstream society. We talked about citizens creating that connection to the mainstream. And if they become isolated, it's easier to dismiss them, and it's also easier to repress them. So if you create sort of state or media or police create this complicit narrative which isolates them from the mainstream, that it's easier to excuse violent repression against that type of target or group. And also Bill Moyer notes that if they hold on too strongly to sort of political correctness or absolute political correct without sort of being able to bring people along in a political journey and learn from them, that can also be alienating and make sure they don't grow. So there's some risk involved if you are on the sort of the fringes. But yeah, that's a whole other discussion about radical fringe and how does this work with the movements. And I'd love to do a workshop on that at some point, but not part of this one. Thank you for that. Last one, change agents. So change agents were the ones who worked on sort of education, long-term strategy work in movements. Could you give me an example of perhaps a change agent, if you think of it? Iris?
I'd say, so I'm a forest activist in Sweden, and part of what I do is organize a trip where youth go out into forest areas and look for endangered species to protect them from clear cutting. And I'd say that's more of a long-term thing because it takes a lot of time. It's very time consuming and resource consuming, but on the other hand, it builds interest in biodiversity and local environment that lasts over time, and that interest can then make the people that engage with us engage with others. So it creates more of a ripple effect, I'd say.
I'm really curious because I think you can make the argument for that to be citizen as well as change agent work. I think maybe it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
These aren't clear. This is a model, right? These are not
Yeah.
clear definitions, right? That's really interesting. Yeah. That's a good example. Thank you for raising that. Any other examples of who could be a change agent? Tracy, sorry.
I'm just thinking maybe someone who is creating some sort of, let me say, people who are using hemp plastic to create, people are using hemp to create plastic because it will solve, let me say, it will help solve the plastic pollution in a long term. Yeah, over.
Or would that be more of a citizen? A lot of sort of social entrepreneurship might be also classified within a citizen role, like creating those solutions and creating those alternatives directly. Yeah, so like I said, these are not clear-cut differentials as well. There's some overlap between those. I would argue a great example of change agents are all of you. Building the hubs, creating spaces for people to meet, to engage on these issues and bring people into movements. These are classic change agent behaviors. And I think it's one of the roles that's very often very least recognized within movements. And I want to take the opportunity to recognize that sort of strategic and like long-term thinking that you are all doing, and that should really be valued in movements and creating change as well. Bill Moyer will argue that changes are very effective as they sort of promote education and convincing the majority of society, organizing grassroots networks, promoting long-term strategies, and creating sort of that permanent organizations or that enable people to engage and build this sort of long-term and organizational roles we talked about. But Bill Moyer also cautions against that they're ineffective when they have a sort of excessively utopian worldview or only focus on their own sub-movement. Then they run the risk of sort of like not being able to engage with sort of the majority and build those bridges. And also ineffective social change activists can foster patriarchal forms of organizations or colonial forms of organization that don't sort of take this intersectionality approach to it or reinforces systems of oppression in the work that they're doing. And there's also sometimes ineffective change agents will ignore personal issues and needs and care for activists and sort of push things along and push without thinking about capacity and how we help each other to work effectively in these. Tracy, please.
Sorry, I'm just having trouble understanding the change agent. Is it someone who's ideal? Is that what we want to be? Because I'm also like seeing the ineffectiveness. It's a lot more. Yeah.
Well, I don't think Bill Moyer presents this as sort of like everybody is this. So you see, so it's more like a change agent has this sort of role and what they could do, but then they're not as good at that role if they foster patriarchal structures, if they ignore the needs of activists and so forth. So it's not about it being an either, like this is not the package. You could be a change agent and create non-hierarchical structures. You can be a change agent that builds anti-oppression into your organization, that does build resilience in your organization. So it's not about sort of having an either or. Like, yeah, it doesn't have to be part of that. But it's also a responsibility if you're a change agent. You are taking these sort of structures, engaging with people and bringing new people into the movements or organizing strategies for the movement. And any sort of facilitation role or strategy or organizing role has a responsibility in thinking about doing it in a productive and positive way. That clear things up for you, Tracy? Great.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Then I'm just going to mention this, but it actually deserves much more in-depth time than we have right now. I want to prioritize some other work that we're going to do. But a continuation of Bill Moyer is this idea that the level of participation of the different roles varies throughout a movement's life cycle. And Bill Moyer has this sort of very simplified movement action plan, it's called. And of course, it's not always linear like this is, and things go back and forth. But the idea is that in any sort of movement, you can identify that in the beginning, you're in business as usual, and this sort of problem is not being addressed. Then sort of the stress is built up in the system, and reformers have a bump, right there trying to sort of create change, and they prove that the normal channels fail, that the system is not able to take care of the issue. So reformers have a key role in the beginning. And then you see conditions being ripening, citizens taking charge, creating the solutions they need themselves and addressing the problem in society. And then you'll have what they call trigger events. That could be anything that causes sort of widespread understanding of the issue and spurs and galvanizes action, leading to sort of takeoff of the rebel role. Some unfortunate examples of this could be the murder of George Floyd in the United States being a trigger event for the launch of the Black Lives Matter movement in the US and also globally. You can think about sort of in various countries, you see certain natural disasters, forest fires, monsoons, typhoons, creating sort of trigger event for awareness on climate change issues. But it can also be created by the movement. I'd argue that Fridays for Future was able to create its own trigger event by having sort of massive engagement in school strikers. So it can vary what a trigger event comes from. And then there's usually a tendency where all this sort of activity is happening, more citizens are getting engaged, all this awareness and pressure, and then something is called perceived activist failure. But because before sort of change actually happens within politics or the systems, activists will either sort of burn out, they will die down, not as many activities, and people will typically say then that the movement failed. But what they haven't done during that time instead is built support among the public and understanding, change the narrative, change the way discourse is happening in society. And there might be re-trigger events where rebels have to come back and fight for it again. And citizens are doing the change they want to see on their own. And then towards the resolution, you see the rise of the reformer again by implementing and building upon the movement's success and creating those systemic changes. And then the citizen role becomes less necessary because ideally the state or the system of power has taken over the responsibility for creating that change. So these varied and all of these roles are important in creating change. So this model can take another discussion by itself, and I don't want to address that right now. I want you to have that sort of reflection that these models and these different roles do support each other and do build upon each other. And even though there's usually conflict between these roles, in your space, in your hubs, you may be you may be face to face of those conflicts between different groups. But sort of keep that in mind that these roles really rely on an ecosystem of movements. So that's really going to come down to the challenge that we're setting for you in trying to create more youth engagement in your hubs, in your spaces, in the movements in your regions, is how do we build and create hubs where we encourage people to join regardless of what role there are, or how to foster the sort of community and the diversity in the community, which makes it quite difficult. So that's where I want to introduce the tree of engagement, and then we're going to break up and try to run those exercises and reflect on our own hubs. So, sorry, excuse me. The model we have, I should stress, is a prototype. You're being one of their test subjects, so I'm sorry about that beforehand, and I'd love your feedback on this. But when we're talking about the tree of engagement, we want to see our organization and the structures we offer in our organization as a bit of a tree. And then you can imagine the branches being the different ways people can be engaged in our group, be it our hub, be it our campaign group, whatever level we might be at. It could be different working groups, it could be different activities that are offered, it can be sort of a demonstration, it can be, whatever might come up depending on what type of organization you have. These are different ways people can engage into your work. If somebody joins a hub, they can go to this type of event, or they can help out in building this, or they can just, create a cafe, makerspace cafe in one of your spaces, whatever it might be, that different types of activities or stuff for ways that people can join. And then, so those are the branches. And then you can imagine the trunk of the tree is different ways people can climb the tree. So think of systems, structures, and practices that enable people to climb the tree, be it clear information about what events are coming up, be it a buddy system, so you get to know somebody who's been active for a while and can learn more as you get involved, be it project cafes where different activities come and tell about their what they're up to, so people can easily figure out where they'd like to join or would like to stay. So the trunk of the tree is the idea of different ways that, or systems, approaches, structures, and practices that help people get engaged, and the branches are what they can engage in. Does that make sense as a differentiation? Yeah. And so a bit of why we're doing this tree model as well is that many of you may have seen in various NGOs in different forms, there's also a discussion of ladder of engagement, that these are different steps in the way you take on supporting. Maybe you sort of sign a petition, and then you join a demonstration, and then you become a volunteer, and then you organize a demonstration, and then you do something. Like, there might be different ways so people can structure, and NGOs use this a lot. However, when we've been working with a lot of allies, we find that it's not really as clear for them. Movements are much more complicated, they're non-linear, there's different ways to get engaged. You don't want to value one level of engagement above the other. People have various forms of time they can engage with different movements. So we really wanted to break away from this sort of linear thinking of how people engaged, and came up with this idea of climbing the tree instead. And there's no one way to climb the tree. Everybody does things differently. Everybody are interested in different things. Primarily, these are people doing volunteer time and volunteer work, so they will have to spend their time on something they enjoy as well. And all these different parts or different elements of the work enables the group, the hub, the organization to succeed. So we need to value all these in a different way than sort of a hierarchy. And last, there's also the risk of falling off the tree. And we really want to recognize that risk. If you climb too high for too long, you may burn out. You may get too tired, or you may slip and fall. And similarly, if it's not accessible to climb, or it's unclear, or there's no sort of structure, people will leave the group. People might just climb down and leave. It's too hard, it's too difficult. So both in the terms of what we're offering, but also how we enable people to join, both of these aspects are important, the branches and the trunk, if you will. So an example of this would be, so the way we use this as an exercise, as a self-reflection exercise, and we ask groups and people to sort of fill these out. So we're going to try this today. We'll get like this tree model, and you'll be able to fill in the different activities in the branches and the different things you're doing, structures, onto the trunk. We're still working on actually designing the model, so this was our very quick and rough version. We'd like to have the trunk broader so you can actually write in it, but we're not quite there yet. We're still developing that. But an example of how this would look, for example, would be if we took a group that is trying to stop a highway expansion through a neighborhood. So the group of local activists are trying to organize to stop this expansion. So the branches will be ways people can engage in that group. They might join a communication group that does sort of press work and media work around this. They can join an action and logistics groups that organizes demonstrations or organize leafletting and outreach to the community. They might join the strategy and research group, where people are trying to sort of build a long-term strategy, research alternative solutions that could be offered instead. They can join the finance group, which is working on fundraising to enable this, or an internal process group that tries to do the coordination between the different working group or different ways to get engaged. So there are many different sort of working groups people can join if they want to be part of this group that's stopping the highway expansion. And then the trunk then is the ways people can climb the tree. So the ways these practices and systems they have in place to make it easier for people to join and decide where they want to work in this organization. So they have a buddy system in place, meaning that every time a new person joins, they have a buddy that helps guide them and answer any questions that they might have about how things are working. They're very clear about there being a flexible time commitment, that not everybody can give as much time, and they're very conscious about making sure that people understand that you can join as much as you want to or as little as you want to. And they also have monthly plenary meetings where all the different working groups present what they have been up to and make sure that there's clear communication and decision making between them. So that's just an example off the top of our head of how you can stop this highway expansion, or how you'd use the tree to reflect on this group. Does that make sense? Any questions on the tree in general? Super clear? Iris has a question?
I just like to note that from my own experience, the two can be combined in the way that you can have formalized structures of not hierarchy, but leadership, but still be mindful in how you go about those in a way that doesn't make the, say, grassroots feel less important.
Absolutely. My discussion about sort of hierarchy was not on sort of how organ groups are structured, but more about the ladder of engagement tool itself.
Yeah.
So there can obviously be hierarchies and structures and hierarchies of decision making within an organization, but we want to use the tree of engagement model to sort of map out how people are organized within that. So, for example, one activity here in an organization could be to join the board of the organization, which brings in maybe more time commitment, some other responsibilities in perhaps a decision-making capacity. And that could be one way you can apply to, you can be a candidate to join the board within the structure. And that's one type of activity. And there might be another activity that's more volunteer-based or so forth. So this doesn't take away from any sort of structure of decision-making. It is not a model of decision-making in a sense. It's more about trying to find and identify those different types of activities. So when you fill out the branches, it's more of like, okay, what ways can people get engaged? And in our hub, it might be, you can join this type of activity, or you can help organize this, or you can be part of the team, and of course, in the team, you might have more responsibilities and decision-making as well. So there are different ways to join and support a hub, depending what kind of organization you're in, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it may not be as much patriarchy as prestige that lies at the root of the ladder problem, if you'd want to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
And so it's not about sort of, changing the way we organize. It's a bit different way of visualizing what we're offering people. This is a lovely conversation to have as well. Different forms of hierarchical, non-hierarchical organization structures, looking at, I run workshops on this. I love it. I think it's fascinating how we organize. There's some great books I can recommend if you're interested. But this is not for that. This is more a tool for us to reflect on what are we offering people as they join and engage with our groups, and how are we helping them. So what are we offering is the branches, and then how are we helping them engage is a trunk. Does that make sense? Yeah, great. Then we're going to challenge you to try this out. So we're going to do this in 2 steps. And the first one is to really start, what are we doing now? So we're not going to talk about new ideas. We're not going to talk about, what we'd like to see, because that's going to come in the second step. But this is just going to be a first brainstorm and trying to fill out the tree. What does it look like right now in our hubs? And I'll just show you before we decide which groups we have, because we might need to combine a couple different groups to have a conversation. So here's a couple sort of guiding questions that you could have, and I'll put them in the chat as well. Sort of like, what are the different branches old and new members can climb? What roles, responsibilities, and activities can they take on? What working groups or tasks exist formally in your organization or informally in an organization? And then for the branches, and then to think about the trunk. What values and processes are in place to help people climb the tree? Plenary meetings, clear communications, internal trainings, whatever that might be, to sort of identify and try to articulate those as well. And the way we're going to do that is in what we're calling a Jamboard. So let me just open that up so you can see it. So we created this little bit of a Jamboard, and depending on which hub you'll do, you'll choose which one to join. If you're joining by phone, it might be a little bit trickier for you, but then you can ask somebody else in your group to perhaps share their screen with the Jamboard in mind, so you can see it, because it might be harder for you on the phone. So if you're in a group with somebody on the phone, please make sure that they have access to this view. If you go up on the top here, you can just simply switch to the next frame to find your hub, whichever one you are representing. I think I have all of them, and also the global team if we do a global group to join. And each of these sort of post-it notes are editable. So you can just double click on one of these, and then you can write whatever you want in that and press save, and it will change up in that structure, and you can move it around. If you want more post-it notes, you can just on the left-hand side, there's a little sticky note thing here, and you can just add another one, and it'll come up there. So super easy tool to use. should be quite clear. And we're going to give you 15 minutes in groups to have sort of discussion and try to fill out how are things right now in the tree. And then our next step after our break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what can we add to our tree. So that'll be the next brainstorm. But yeah, maybe because we're small groups, we're just going to do 10 minutes, I think. And Jones, can you remind me which hub you're closest to?
Nairobi. I'm with Tracy.
Okay, great. Perfect. Then we'll do a Nairobi hub, a Johannesburg hub, and a Stockholm hub. Yeah, so Fanny, you can join that one as well.
Yes.
Great. So Fanny's going to assign you to breakout rooms. I'll drop in and check if there's any questions, but also in the there's also a system for you to ask for help if you need it in the breakout room, and I'll come in. But I'll be dropping by to check in on you. Any questions to this exercise? Oh, you need the link to the board. I almost forgot.
Yeah.
So the link is in the chat. And once again, if you're on the phone, that might be a bit trickier. Please help each other out to make sure that works. I almost forgot the most important part. So Fanny, can we actually set that to 10 minutes instead?
Yes, absolutely. I'm about to create the breakout rooms and soon assigning you to the right room. Just a minute.
Great. Any last minute questions while Fanny does that? I'll stop sharing. Oh yeah, resend the questions. There we go. See, somebody's keeping track of the facilitation. There. So the questions in the chat, you'll still be able to see the chat when you're in the breakouts, or if you have any more questions to me, I'll drop by in. Thank you, Tracy.
So how do I assign myself?
You can join after you set up the breakout, yeah.
Then I open all of the rooms and it is, I will soon join your group and Karl will jump around.
See you soon. So you should be seeing a button come up that asks you to join. Just click the join button. Andila, are you able to? Yes, perfect.
Must fall, oh shall must fall. My butcher people not forgotten shall must fall. They poisoned the water, threatened health of all. My butcher people not forgotten shall must fall.
In the 60s, it was predicted that it would make the land shake. Now 60 years later, extraction has caused over 1,000 earthquakes.
We're just waiting for last people to join.
They tore the land and cracks in the homes and in the people too. Still bureaucracy, state complicity, protects the fossil fuels.
We block the streets, demand accountability. Oh, can you hear our call? Shall must fall. Oh, shall must fall.
All right, we're all back, I think. Sorry about that. I just play music when I'm not in a conversation. All right, so thank you for doing that. I do apologize to the team that had the tech problems. Jamboard doesn't really work well with phones, and so thank you for adapting and just taking handheld notes instead. But what we're going to do now is actually we're going to take a break. So you have I'll send a link to a song in the chat. It's Shell Must Fall. That is this movement against Shell in the Netherlands, now in the UK, calling out all their environmental crimes across the world. So 10 minutes was really short for that exercise. I do agree, Tracy. But this is just sort of start thinking where we are. I want you to take a break now to sort of clear your head a little bit, and then we'll get into the really interesting, meaty discussion about where we're going and what else we could do. So if you still have things you haven't identified that you'd like to identify about what you're doing now, that can be part of the next conversation as well. But I also want to respect that we've been talking for an hour, 15 minutes already. It's good to take a little break and take a little rest. And you'll get much more time, I think at least 20 minutes, maybe 25 in your groups when we try this again. Does that sound fair? All right, then I invite you to take, can we say 10 minutes and then make it precisely 10 minutes? All right, so if you get, according to my watch, if you can be back 20 to the hour, there'll be a 10-minute break. So 20 minutes to the hour in 10 minutes. All right, great. Then I'll see you all back here soon for the second part.
And then pause the recording meanwhile.
Is everybody back from the break? Iris, I see you there. Maybe a thumbs up or a little plus in the chat if you're back. So we know everybody's here. Thumbs ups. Jones. Andile, Gile. Yeah, there we are. Great. Then welcome back. Thank you very much, Jones, for the lovely music in the break. I do appreciate that. I always like music in online courses because it's just different being online and the way we can connect as well. So thank you so much for that, sharing that. Right, let's get back to it. So the next step, I have lost my presentation already. The next step after the break here is that we want to go, we've done our sort of mobilizing, organizing, the roles in the movement, the first step in the tree of engagement, and some of you feel like you have some extra things you want to add to that to really reflect all the work you've been doing locally. But now we're going to go into discussion, and sort of what I think is the most interesting discussion is what could we do to add to our tree, or what can we add to our tree to engage more people? So what I want you to have, I'm going to have 20 minutes for this, so let me just double check time. Yeah, 20 minutes, and we can still have a bit of a hear back from each other afterwards. But so the discussion questions I'll put in the chat as well as how do we improve our tree? How can our hub improve? Is it easy for people to get involved and leave in a nice way if they want to? What processes of collective care do we apply to prevent burnouts? Are we offering activities from people across the 4 roles? So thinking back to the 4 roles of Bill Moyer, the change agent, the rebel, the reformer, and the citizen, are we offering things that could appeal to this broad range of different types of engagement people might have? And so what are the obstacles for getting involved in my group? So what are the challenge, like thinking from an outsider point of view, what are the obstacles to get involved? And what can we do, systems in place we can place to challenge that? So in your tree where you've been working, if you just check the next frame, like you've all found, it's just an open blank page for you to express or take notes however you want. Once again, apologies to the ones who are on their phones. If it's easier for you to take notes for hand, just do that instead. And then we're all going to gather back after those 20 minutes and just hear a couple of minutes reflections from the groups, especially on what can we do more, what can we add to our tree, as we hope that it's going to inspire the other hubs who might want to steal or borrow politely the ideas to improve their own hubs as well. So that's going to be our collective exercise for the next 20 minutes. Any questions on that point? All right, then we're just going to pop you back into the same breakout groups. I'll be here if you need it. Turns out it might be an issue on, if you ask for help, you get sent to Fundy because Fundy is the host. So if you need help, please just press the blue button on the right corner to leave your breakout room, and you'll come back to the main room and I'll help you out. And then I can assign you back into your room so you can have that conversation. So that'll be our way to get help. And I might just pop in out of curiosity to see how things are going as well. We'll have a whole 20 minutes to set this up. And unless there's something, I'll see you in a bit.
Shutting them down, don't watch the news, be the news, don't watch the news, be the news, don't watch the news, be the news, don't watch the news. Okay, everybody should be back there. I feel like a radio show. That was Don't Watch the News, Be the News by Pete the Temp. Another one of my favorite activist songs.
We lost some people.
Yes, unfortunately. I think we lost the Johannesburg crew. I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure.
Maybe they have some internet trouble. I can see if they load shedding. Oh, darn. Oh,
There, come back.
yay.
All right. So welcome back. Thank you for making back if you've been having some load shedding problems. And thank you for bearing through and joining the conversation. So what I was going to think we're going to do for the last 10 minutes, and we only have 10 more minutes, we're going to be super quick, is we'd love to hear a little bit of reflection from each group, maybe mentioning one or two ideas that you were excited about what you could do to develop your hub or do differently. So Tracy and I already had started talking, so maybe I'm going to ask the Nairobi crew if you'd like to share one or two ideas.
Jarans, do you want to go?
No, go.
Okay, so for us, as I was telling Karl earlier, like we're having a bit of some difficulties trying to go through the right systems. Like the activities are there in plenty, but converting them into actual systems or tools that work was something else. But yeah, one thing we're looking at is including fun games and arts in our activities, fun games and activities in our fun games and arts in our activities. This is basically to, like, you know, keep people excited and make them come to us. So we're looking at, as a system, facilitating fun challenges, like for example, the best environmental tweet, they get something, or the best 1 minute documentary, or the best blog. And then another thing might be, you know, like we are posting it into our website or amplifying the youth activities on our social media platforms, stuff like that. Another thing we're looking at is having a podcast studio. So this will help give a platform for our youth to, like, a real-time platform where they can speak up and talk about the activities and what they're doing. And this will definitely work well if we continue to build a robust social media presence. Yeah, so those are our two, let me say top two. Over.
That's great ideas. I love the sort of the challenge, and the podcast is a great example of a good activity, but also something that enables more people to join in and find other activities they could join by like highlighting all the work that people are doing. Excellent ideas. I'm jealous now. I want to join this. Antile, are you able to join in? Maybe if you want to share a couple of like thoughts from your conversation as well.
Okay, thank you, Karl. Nice one from Tracy. So, because I'm having network connections, and I'd like to put an apology for Machile. We had to lose him because of load shedding. So he was still giving his ideas. So I didn't get to share my ideas with him. So I'd rather read out his, because this is recorded. So he might not say that I did not, do him justice. All right. So now the one that he kept on, he was explaining, which was a concern that we can improve, was that, as you know, the guidelines from Greenpeace, the security guidelines, sometimes they can be stringent, they can be very tough. So if you have young people who've been, especially when we were speaking about, I think if you have someone who's a rebel, and that's him, right? I'm quoting him to say, if you have other people who've learned other things from other organizations and they join Greenpeace, but you'll find that it's a young person, they haven't done the NVDA, that might make it difficult for them to join in. Maybe to improve, we can have just maybe, especially from the Planet One side of things, have, some of the rules kind of like maybe being loosened up a bit, so it can make it easier for young people to have access. And then another thing that he mentioned was, besides the guidelines, he also spoke about collaborations. So he gave an example, right? That remember and by no means is he criticizing Greenpeace, right? He was just thinking of ways, because I understood him. Yeah, cool. So there's one thing, right? Because we had a conversation in the previous meetings. So there was this idea about young people wanted to do a project on eco bricks, right? So if the eco bricks, using plastics and to create bricks. Yeah. So, but Greenpeace has a plastic campaign, has an anti-plastic campaign. So we had young people who were like, no, they were excited because we had in our country of this community, right? It's an informal community, right? So they're starting to build schools, classrooms using the eco bricks, which is plastic. So we had young people from Greenpeace volunteers. Machile was there, I was there myself. So he raised that as well to say it was a challenge because they wanted to come to the hub to learn more how to do Greenpeace, to capacitate their communities, their schools, by building more classrooms, right? Using plastics. But again, you know, Greenpeace has a no plastic campaign. So, and last thing that he was, for people not to get burnt out, these are the points he raised before we lost him. He said, one, we must share responsibilities as a team, right? To say like, and share the workload. Yeah, so I'll end there.
Great.
I hope I didn't throw you under the bus, Carl.
Sorry?
I hope I did not throw Machile under the bus. I did not say anything wrong.
I'm sure they'll have the opportunity to defend themselves at the next meeting. But really interesting insights and really interesting conversation as well. Like, how are our rules adapted for our target audience, and how do we relate organizations and different stakeholders in our project to the people we're actually trying to engage and work with? And are the rules for an organization necessarily the rules we need to apply in each situation? These are really important conversations to have. So yeah, thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, last but not least, Iris, would you like to share some of your thoughts as well? One or two examples.
Yeah, so we've had some difficulties at Momentum with getting people to come back and to keep rejoining activities. And so we've been sort of trying to figure out where the problem lies. And I think a big thing is that the ones that are already interested and active in climate issues in Sweden in our target groups already have other platforms or established platforms of like taking part in those questions, and the ones that don't have the access to those platforms, we haven't really been able to raise interest with. And I think that one solution could be to kind of try to promote that, like more collaborations and co-ops with the rest of Fridshuset, and to like establish our presence in the building more. And also if there are youth leaders in other like parts of the house that, for example, have someone coming back to them frequently that want to do something on climate, they could say, hey, this is really cool, you should be able to do more of this. Unfortunately, we don't have those competences here, but if you go downstairs and directly to your right, there is another hub which focuses more on that. And because there are a lot of very successful like ventures happening in the building, but I feel a bit like where the ones that already have kids coming back are maybe not very inclined to share, so to speak, because they want to keep the kids at their activities, because unfortunately the size of the grants often rely on how many people you have engaging long term.
Yeah, absolutely, that's an issue. yeah, how do we avoid sort of competing for people,
Yeah.
but still providing the sort of platform and making sure that's available? None of these are easy questions. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Iris. And I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to engage on this. I do want to recognize that we're out of time now, and I want to respect your time and all the other commitments you have. So big thank you. I want to say that the tool that we've been offering here, we're going to try to make a PDF version, an exercise version, if you'd like it to run again with different constellations or different parts of your local group, if this conversation was useful to you. And we'd also always love feedback on the tool and how we can improve it. Like I said, it's a prototype. But yeah, I hope that it was useful. I hope that it helped spark some thoughts that you can bring back further with your development. On behalf of sort of the Movement Hub and the work we're doing, I also just wanted to share real quick that we have other opportunities to be able to get engaged or other type of exercises we're offering. We have more workshops and digital courses that are available for anybody who'd like to join. We have one coming up next week on causing more trouble and action logic and how to plan actions and protests for those in the rebel role. I see Duran's happy around there. And then we also have one on scouting and scouting and planning for actions. So we have a series right now, including many others coming up. So you can follow those resources at themovementhub.org if you'd like to discover some more. If you want to dig deeper in a bit of the theory we mentioned here, there's a couple of books, particular Doing Democracy by Bill Moyer, but also on sort of the broader intersections and movement ecology. I really recommend a book called This Is an Uprising by Englers. But this is the nerd in me. I always want to cite some references and some more ways to get engaged. So once again, we're over time. Huge thank you to everyone. Thank you for inviting me and letting me part of a small part of your development. Can't wait to see what you get up to and all the trouble you're causing and how you're supporting all the people engaged. And thank you for being change agents. And thank you for doing this sort of important work in our movements. And I hope to be able to work with you soon again. Have a great day, everyone.
Right back at you. See ya.
Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
Karl.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.